two other exhibitions in the gallery right now. Andrew Romanoff, Life Work, and Bernie Shimke, Tsunami on Paper. And all three shows are really worth seeing for real in the gallery, but there's only one day left. Tomorrow, these shows close. I just wanted to give you a little background about this show, which began at Sometimes Books, which was a very small, under the radar kind of gallery, just around the corner from Gallery Route 1. And many of the artists in the show were at Sometimes Books. It closed this winter, and we didn't have a chance to celebrate the closing. So Mary Eubank and I, it was in Mary's studio, Sometimes Books, we decided to show the artists here at Gallery Round with Owen to be our job is really the work that she selected is just one. And one of our favorite little traditions Sometimes Books would be a show and tell at the end of the show. Invite the public to come and are very about the work. And that's what we're trying to do at this Zoom. We're pretty new at the Zoom technology, so please forgive us for any glitches that might happen. Shelly Rugg, our coordinator, is the web host. Tim and I are in the gallery, and we're going to walk around. All the artists will be speaking from their remote Zoom locations. I think that's enough for me. We're going to start with Pamela Blotner and her wonderful albatross.
Hello, I'm Pamela Blotner, and this is Albatross, and I'm very pleased to be in this show. And I want to thank Z and Mary, Z Moravitz and Mary Eubank for starting Sometimes Books, GRO, and everyone there, especially Sherrie Rugg, and also Renee Owen for putting me in the show. So what I can say about Albatross is that I have different kinds of work. I make some very serious pieces, and I also counteract that with humor. And humor is the best way to get through the world, I think. So Albatross comes from a series called Great Birds in Literature, and this is one of them. This is Black Swan Green. All of them have to do with the classic. This is, of course, the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. And it was carved, put together, first, I guess, constructed. It's mahogany and also basswood, constructed, glued together, carved, and painted. And let's see, I don't believe that I have any.
Okay, we can hear you now.
Anyway, I was looking at my artist statement, and it looks like when I saw these columns, I was thinking, well, where do we see columns in front of courtrooms? And so it's like justice. Somehow it represents justice to me. And the books bridging across there as a beam is like the law. And right now, law is skewed and justice is skewed and distressed, and we're hoping for a change soon. Anyway, thank you.
Okay, our next will be Sherrie Lovler. And if you hold this, I will be
unmute and on video. Okay, there I am. Hi, want to thank you for having me be part of the show, and special thanks to Renee Owen for inviting me in. So I'm a calligraphic artist. I used to do a lot of straightforward calligraphy, and then I started doing calligraphic paintings. So this book, which is called Marking Time, A Daily Practice Through the Pandemic, I had designed the book before. It was in a class actually with the Sonoma Book Arts group. And it's 360 pages. It's this big book. It's only 4 inches tall, 3 inches wide. And when the pandemic started, I decided to do a practice of every single night, it ended up being, of working in these pages. And every day it was something completely different. It was based on what tools I had out. So sometimes day after day, I had similar colors. I work with mostly ink and watercolor, gouache. There's some gold leaf in there. And there's certain themes that run through it. There are alphabets stuck in these. That one on the right might even have an A in it and some letters. So some of these are alphabetic. Some of them are just gestural marks. This one was fun, just doing just different brush strokes and then a semic writing. So sometimes it's not, and there's hardly any words in the whole piece. So it's all just gestural mark making or a semic writing. And let's see, yeah, keep opening different ones. And sometimes just really quick. I mean, sometimes these took me 10 minutes, sometimes they took half an hour. It didn't, it was just sort of what I did every day. And I loved doing it. And once I gave it into the gallery, it's like I had intended to do another book and I never did. So it's like I really miss the practice. And I find just keeping my hand wet and just creating something new each time it was so fulfilling to do it. So I was really pleased to get it out because no one had seen it because I'm not seeing anybody. But every day just to hold this and look at it and to plan it was really fun. I'm glad I have an opportunity to show it. Thank you.
The next artist will be Linda McDonald with more notebook work. Linda, are you there? I don't hear her.
Yeah, hi Z and everyone. Yeah, I'm on Bob's iPad, as you can see. After the pandemic, I started these 2 books, and I was doing just a lot of walking around my town here in Mendocino County, and I was working with gouache, and I love this sketchbook. It's Stillman and Byrne, and you can buy them in all of the art stores. I first found out about them at Riley Street in Santa Rosa, and they're totally bound, sewn, and they have a really good fiber to them. This is probably like 150-pound thickness, and they come in all different sort of sizes. But anyway, yeah, being home all the time and walking around in the creeks, I filled up a couple of these sketchbooks and just had a great time doing that. Yeah, and usually I drive further away and sort of walk through the redwoods. So this was nice to be more local. And yeah, Z, you're doing a great job of flipping through the pages. Thank you. And with this kind of sketchbook, you can really open them up and sort of make sure you can work flat on them and and turn them vertically like that too. Yeah. That's me. Yeah, if you don't know what to do for sketching, you can always do yourself. Yeah, that's the end papers. And I've been doing a lot of the interior of redwood trees. And because you just never know what's going to be inside when you go into them. And I photograph and then, do real large ones also, large oils.
See, if you turn back to that one, Linda, isn't it on the wall behind you?
Well, it's a different one that I'm doing, but yeah, it's a similar kind of thing. So it's, yeah, similar, but it's a different tree. But what was it? Z, turn the page once more. There was something. Yeah, that one. Oh yeah, these trees are, they were just bought by Save Our Redwoods, and they're over on the coast, and they're redwoods, but because of the wind, they are all bent in these really strange ways. It's like they're going around in sort of a whirlwind. And they're really amazing, but they're up in a place called Usall that's a dirt road that's hard to get to. But anyway, it was fun to pull out some old photographs and do these from that. It's part of the Lost Coast where there's no paved road. So you have to either have a 4-wheel drive or walk in to find them. Trees, yes, the ever amazing sculptures of trees and ferns.
The next artist on the list is Susan Zimmerman. If she's here, it's right behind you, Tim.
Hello. Thank you for including me in this show, and Renee did a fabulous job of curating it. So the piece you're going to see was inspired by my grandmother, who the family Loris stole. She grabbed a ticket off the kitchen table. This was in Russia, and ran off. It was a steamship ticket, ran off to America at age 17. So I did a bunch of research and found some steamship tickets around 1900 for passage to Ellis Island. And I printed them out. This is actually the second version of this same project. And in this case, I tea stained them to make them look older. What was really interesting, and they're sewn together by hand, but what was really interesting is to see all these real tickets and somehow be able to imagine the people that came over on these ships. And then looking at some of the photographs of the people on the ships just was very evocative, and the project it felt much larger than just a sort of dedication to my grandmother. It just felt like it was all immigrants. And then some of the things I printed out actually weren't tickets. It turned out they were inspection coupons. When I look more carefully, these are mostly tickets, but I found these inspection coupons that the immigrants to Ellis Island had to pin to their clothing to show they'd been vaccinated and that they were free of disease. And some of them had to stay at Ellis Island. So that led to another project where I somehow imagined the people wearing those coupons. So in general, I don't usually work historically, but there's something really interesting about doing that, and how like the ghosts of the past somehow become very real. That's it.
Great. Okay.
Thank you, Susan. Our next artist is Kathleen Edwards. And what we've got here is a vertical accordion book. And then, I don't know if Kathleen, if you want to talk about this horizontal accordion book that you did collaboratively. But
Yeah,
so-
I'll just talk briefly about each one. So do you want to start? We're starting with the collaborative one?
Well, we can start with this, whichever one you want.
Okay, let's start with the hanging one. That's fine. Yeah, the one on the wall. By the way, thank you, Renee and Z and everybody who had a part in the show, and happy to be part of it. So this is a hanging accordion book. This folds up into a book about 11 inches by 6 inches. So everything folds back in together. This is called Shelter in Place. So basically this book was inspired by basically my need to keep my hands busy for sanity during the shutdown. And so I've been doing a lot of work. There's not a whole lot else to do. So this is done with a mix of materials using collage as a starting place. And then I add paint, ink, color pencils, markers, rubber stamps, whatever suits the idea. And it really is, the subject matter is just, it's kind of the mix of materials is kind of a metaphor for the mix of the energetic aspects of the current world, death, frustration, restrictions, anger, peace, rebirth, reordering, rethinking, surrender. And basically the collage elements, I use both found cutouts, and also some of those, the bones are scans of actual animal bones that I have. And then I cut them out and use them for collage. So that's that one. We can move on to the collaborative one. So this is one of several collaborative pieces that I worked on with two other artists, Paula Gray in the Anderson Valley in Mendocino County, and Susan Gross, who's up in Vashon Island, Washington. And we decided at the beginning of the shutdown to do this, and we've done several of, this is one of, I've lost count now how many we've done, but so we basically pre-folded an accordion book, plain, watercolor paper, and one person would start the book, do page 1, and then we would pass it around through the mail, going in the same direction each time. So this one is 2 passes each, because there's 3 of us, so 6 pages. And then the person who started it would complete it by making the cover. So the cover came last. And we, similar to my process, we used a lot of different medium: collage, paint, ink, pencil, watercolor, anyway, the process was, I have to tell you, was so great. And we've got one we haven't finished yet, and maybe we're going to do some more. But it was such a great way to feel connected. And also a really nice thing to, if you run out of ideas, then you have the fun of opening this thing that came in the mail, and you have your little assignment that you've been given, and you can, see how to respond to what the last person did. And it just so happened that our styles are very kind of similar, but the 3 of us, our styles just worked so well together. all of us thought. So anyway, it was a totally fun thing, and it was really kind of thrilling to see the things get completed with all of us putting in our input. So that's it.
Thanks, Kathleen. I just want to remind people that there's going to be a brief question and answer time after the artists have finished talking, but you can also use the chat function in Zoom to put in some comments and or questions for the artists if you don't want to stay for the question and answer session. So you're really invited to do that. Now our next artist is Nurka Master, and it's these big pieces on the wall. I think, Tim, you want to come closer to
Right, I will. I just wanted to get the overview first.
Hi. So first, I do want to thank Renee very much for inviting me to the show. And I want to thank everyone involved at the gallery for putting things together. I focused on the theme of immigration because it's very personal to me. And both of my pieces, Journeys into Unknown Territory and Cup of Tea, are both about immigration. I'm going to tell you a little story about how Journeys into Unknown Territory came about. It was very gradual. I was traveling to South Korea every year, and in Seoul, I came across a shop of hanji, which is Korean handmade paper. And I saw these strips that you see on the wall. I don't know, maybe they were left over from the exquisite large sheets that the master papermaker produces, but I couldn't, there was no way I could take one of those large sheets home, but these were easy to roll up and put in my suitcase. And I don't know why I was drawn to them at the moment. Maybe it was the organic colors, the patterns, the texture. I just kept sifting through piles until I decided which ones most appealed to me. As someone who at the time worked primarily with textiles, I had no idea what I was going to do with these strips of paper or why I was even buying any paper, but I wanted them. I just knew I wanted them and no explanation was necessary. At some point, I figured I would know. So I returned to California, and I don't remember how many months passed before one day I picked up a strip and I just started stitching. I didn't know where I was headed and how I would get there, but I just kept going. After I finished one, I started another, and so on, each one entirely different. As I worked quietly alone, I very much enjoyed the meditative nature of the process. And so on the next trip to Seoul, I picked up more strips and continued making marks by using embroidery floss, pearl cotton, raffia, yarn, pretty much just stitching in and out, sometimes French knots, sometimes seed stitches, back stitching, whatever felt right in the moment. And eventually I realized that each stitched page is a journey into an internal experience. And it's an experience in an imagined rather than a physical landscape. And for me, it became a metaphor not only for immigration, but life itself. On various levels, we never know where we're going. And being in this pandemic is just a great reminder of that. Having immigrated to the US as a young child, I understand how challenging such a journey is, and I empathize with others who undergo it. So, like immigrants everywhere throughout history, my refugee parents and I left Europe and embarked on a voyage into unknown territory, toward a land that was a mystery to us, geographically, culturally, linguistically. And these stitched pages do not depict any particular known landscapes, yet they are reminiscent and evocative of places that immigrants travel internally and externally to in order to reach safety. Up or down rivers, across mountains and oceans, through canyons, swamps, and forests. My other work, A Cup of Tea, which is on the pedestal, is the result of another inexplicable accumulation of materials, the tea bag papers and strings that pile up from all the herbal tea I drink. Again, I had no clue as to what I would do with all of it, but I started saving them a few years ago, and occasionally they unexpectedly turn up in my work. For the theme of immigration, I reflected on the polarization that exists not only in the US, but around the world. At one end of the spectrum, there's xenophobia, nationalism, ethnocentrism, all leading to rejection and exclusion. At the other end, there's acceptance, welcoming, inclusion. So what more apt symbol than offering a cup of tea to represent inviting someone in? I layered the tea bag papers and fused them onto thin interfacing back and front in order to create the pages. And I used tea bag strings to stitch them together. And then I machine stitched the words that typify the opposing sentiments. My hope is that these pages will make viewers pause to consider that we are all immigrants. It's just a matter of when. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mirka. The next artist we're going to, whose work we're going to look at is Louise Pryor. And Louise couldn't be here on the Zoom. I hope she's watching though. Anyway, this is Vision 2020. The world reads the world and weeps. And Louise has done maybe 10 of these dolls that read. And what she said about them is that watching her grandchildren play, she realized that the kids animated the toy and the toys animated them or inhabited them. And so this is an attempt to show the mirroring of, you know, reading and becoming what you read. And of course, these wonderful Raggedy Ann-like dolls, well, Toys R Us. So we look at the piece of art and we become the art as well. And certainly in 2020, we can read the world and weep for sure. Louise is a wonderful fabric artist. She haunts the thrift stores and finds great clothes that, you know, the fabric speaks to her, and then she takes it home and takes apart the original piece, garment, whatever it is, and then creates these dolls or other pieces of artwork. And we're going to see next Teddy Milder's work, and it's right behind you, so just turn around.
Hi, everyone. Also echo everyone's thanks and generosity to both Renee and Gallery Route One. I was able to help Renee hang the show, and it was just a delight and mind-blowing to see everyone's work. So I want to thank all the other artists too, because it was really a beautiful experience. The piece that you're looking at now, and actually both, I have two pieces, and they both were inspired by two different artist residencies that I did in Oaxaca, Mexico. The first one, I arrived in Oaxaca the day after Trump was elected president, which was quite an ominous time to land across the border. And the perspective or the idea that a wall was going to build just loomed large. Everyone there thought it was going to happen within weeks. And so I became obsessed with walls. And as I wandered through Oaxaca and the countryside, I photographed and looked at walls, ancient walls, contemporary walls, as a way to heal myself and think about walls and what they could mean, and also to learn more about the culture and architecture of Oaxaca. And I was just so taken and inspired by the walls. When I got home, I wound up doing archival pigment prints on paper that I had made during my residency at Arte Papel, which is a papermaking workshop just outside of Oaxaca. And I specially coated the paper, which is why it's so textural. And then I stitched into it with silk thread. And there's stitching in each individual panel. There were 35 original images, and they're in 7 sections. This is 6 of the 7 sections. And I look at the stitching as enhancements, as collection of memory, and not just embellishments, but it's a way to intertwine my handiwork with the image to highlight the border, and also to symbolically yet delicately mend the US border and refugee policies. So it's been a very healing and thoughtful project for me. The other piece is border relics, also inspired by the walls. And there's this gorgeous ethnobotanical garden in Oaxaca that has an enormous stand of pipe organ cactus. They're 20 feet tall, and they make a passageway, and they line the passageway like borders or like stanchions, really. And I became fascinated by the infrastructure of the cactus and figured out a way to construct armature out of rusty wire to create the form of the cactus. And then I dipped it into pulp or made handmade sheets of paper that I wrapped around the armature. And it sort of represented to me the relics that were found along and across the border as those tried to make it to freedom and maybe didn't, or maybe left or dropped a few pieces of clothing or other relics. So that's what Border Relics is.
Thank you, Teddy. Our next artist is going to be Jane Ingram Allen, who has 2 pieces. We're looking at one, we'll look at the other in a minute. Hi, Jane.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Thank you to those who made this exhibition possible. And actually, I have 2 pieces in this exhibition. We'll start with this first. It's called Daily Scrolls. And during the pandemic, I was looking through all of the handmade paper samples that I had made in various residencies around the world. And I always make samples with all of the different plants that I use in different places. And these are 4 by 6 inch pieces of paper. And I took those papers out, looking through them, and decided that I would give myself the assignment during this time of quarantine to do something on each piece of paper. For the first 81 days of the pandemic, I started on March 9th, I believe it was. And sometimes I would just draw something or paint something, small piece of paper. Sometimes I would write words or quotations that struck me. And then I was looking for some way to put these all together. And I found a piece of old wire shelving in the garage because it was a time when you couldn't go out to, buy something. So I decided this was a really good thing to do. Use the recycled shelving, and I rolled them up like small scrolls and put them into the wire grid. And then my idea originally, because I do like to make works that are participatory, my idea originally was to have the viewers in the exhibit take out the scrolls and unroll them and look at them and, maybe add something of their own or, do something else and then put it back. So it would be also a constantly changing or transforming artwork. However, with the pandemic, we couldn't do that, but it's still a possibility for the future that this work could be participatory. So you could take one out, unroll it, look at it, examine it, change it, and then put it back into the little 1-inch square. There are 81 of those scrolls. And I used, I got familiar with the scroll form when I was staying so much in Asia. And I also like when this is time, you can look through it. And, just looking through these, it becomes sort of like a spyglass or something. So looking through it is also important. And so I had fun with that, doing, just one every day, took a few minutes of each day. And my other piece in this exhibit is called Stacks. And I made this last year after a family beach vacation. We went with our son and daughter and 2 granddaughters who were about 10 and 12. And one of the things we did at the beach every day was look at all the driftwood, collect some driftwood, and make sort of temporary shelters. And, these were things that would be washed away by the waves or blown over by the wind. They were just really temporary things and, could protect you maybe a little from the sun. And I also collected materials from the beach that I would use for paper making. So this piece is, the handmade paper is made from beach grass and other things I collected during that vacation. And then I decided that I really like the edges of the paper and the handmade paper especially. And, we usually put it up flat at that side of it, but, by turning it sideways and looking at the edges, you get a whole new perspective. So with stacks, I sort of made it stacked up and you look at the edges as much as you do at the face of the paper. And I also liked the idea of being able to look through something and to be able to make something that was a sculptural object, but uses no glue and no armature. It's just thread and pieces of paper. And you can adjust those shelf stacks and, make it different every time it's on. And it's very lightweight, goes with the breezes or with people passing by. It moves. And looking through it and the light coming through it is all an important part of this piece. So I think that's about the time limit here, and I'm happy to answer any questions about the work later. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. If Lynn Dillon is here, we have 2 pieces by Lynn.
Lynn?
No, it's not Lynn, but that's Cheryl, and why don't we look at Cheryl's piece?
We can't hear.
Hey,
Cheryl,
can you hear me now? Okay.
Yeah, good, perfect.
Okay. So this piece came about from a series of questions and the desire to understand how we find ourselves in such a strait, dire circumstances, not just with the pandemic, but with the planet. And so I began thinking about relationships and connections and trying to understand what's happened from a point of view that we're descended from people who revered the earth as a form of mother and the women of the earth as kind of in an analogous relationship. And I started looking at language. I'm also a haiku poet, so I kind of dance and waver between image word, image word, image word, and the resonance of both. They both have form and shape, and like in this particular piece, to me, they have the rhythm and evoke a sense of sound. And so when I was looking back into the terms I was looking at, that's when I found this shock, was that suggested a relationship that's tilted from what it was then to what we have today. And so it kind of got me thinking about a lot of different things. And rather than going down the rabbit hole of despair, since I'm generally a positive type, I started looking beyond what is evident at the moment in our dire straits. And I started understanding that I do have connection. And like with this show, and by the way, of course, many, many thanks to Renee and to Z and all of you at the gallery for making this possible. I just wanted to interject here that I sent links to my cousins in Austin, Texas. And so they've come to see the show through their book arts club. So it's making the rounds in the middle part of the state. It's got legs, as we say. So I was trying to find a sense of imagery that would give this hopeful feel that I see coming out of all this, because we realize out of the loss, we're starting to understand a way forward, a reweaving of what can happen and how we know things in our own mechanisms of today. And one story recently is that endeared itself to me is about crows. There's a group of researchers who've discovered that crows actually do have self-awareness, but through a different mechanism. It's not the kind of brain structure that we have. And so it gives an idea of how we can reconnect with nature and the planet with a deepened sense of understanding of how, different than the native cultures who had the basic science of observation and repeated recognition and understanding. And so I feel like we're all going to come through this with a deeper sense of who we are, where we are, and what we're actually connected to. The piece, the way I have the piece, the hand coming up like this, reaching out, is a reminder to myself that when we talk about earth, the earth literally means the ground, but we're living in a system that's much larger than the earth. We're living in a planetary system. Our nearest star, the sun, gives us the light like 8.3 minutes away, according to NASA. So I think it's important to keep that in mind, and it expands our thought and our sense of possibility. the colors I thought reflected kind of the nature of the earth. And I'm also a musician. I played French horn for many years. So it has the metals and the deep rhythms that I think coming out of the earth that we're not quite aware of because we're not that kind of creature, but it still affects us.
I guess that's are you?
Thank you very much for letting me be part of this.
So we're going to look at Jamie Tabak's work. She's got 3 pieces in the show, and Jamie, you can tell us what to focus on as you speak.
Hello. Thank you again also, Renee, and everyone at Gallery Route 1 for making this possible. And it's good to see everyone. And why don't we just begin at the pandemics box over there. I'm primarily a printmaker, but that does encompass a lot of other practices such as painting and drawing. And sometimes my prints are hanging on a wall and they're behind glass and you're not to touch them. And sometimes I bind them in a book or put them in a box like this so that they can actually be handled. And while sheltering in place in my studio has become my salvation, at daybreak I enter the sanctum of my expressions and emotions and sensories with anticipation, not only for what's to be for me in the studio, but mostly what is to be for all of us, and how will it feel and what will it look like. And here I'm exploring prints inside of prints to magnify and inspect closely the possibilities of what could be. And these images of cells have been consuming my work for many months, ever since I saw the pictures drawn by the children in the detention centers. And those cell structures have become the cells in our bodies, and these images represent the pandemic. They're collagraphs with printed matter, other collaged papers that have printing on them. There's all sorts of little writing and drawing that's not very readable and not meant to be. And these are sort of like a cell in a Petri dish. The box is handmade and holds these prints like this. They're collagraphs and I create them, and these collagraphs I cut up and change and alter, and they seem to work within each other and mix and match sort of. So these shapes stay with me sometimes for maybe even a few years. And I've been totally taken with this crisscrossing of lines and those drawings from the children, because these lines I've drawn are going this way and that and crisscrossing. They don't really lead someplace, and our brain can't connect them to get comfort or see a pattern. When we see a pattern, we tend to get bored and move on. But here you're hitting into these kind of mapping and streets that you can't navigate, very much like the life of the children. The book next to it, Aquifers, and the orange and gray book here, I began making books about 7 years ago and noticed the other bookmakers around me at North Bay Letterpress used a lot of various papers and backgrounds. And at some point, I began to bring in prints of my own to applique, to put letterpress on, and to sort of let these images dance around the pages. And I work by chance. After I have all of this knowledge and experience in me, when I actually go to the paper and begin to print, it sort of just, things happen that I try to forget all the facts. So here you have a collograph is the gray and black underneath, and then the beautiful washi papers that are also printed, torn, and those are the aquifers. And I'm increasingly concerned about what we're taking out of the earth and what is drying up and what we're losing and not putting back in. And this book represents that. There's all sorts of little drawing of symbols. I don't really use words with letterpress. There's sort of these well-designed letters and shapes and symbols that move around my work. The cover is a painting on a heavy watercolor paper. And again, a little bit of the letters and movement to inform you of what's going to happen in the book when you open it.
Thank you, Jamie. I think, Renee, it's down to you.
Thanks, Z and Tim, for being there today to give us a close-up look at all of this work. And thanks to Tim for helping to move 100 pedestals while I was trying to install. This book I call Sheltering, and it too came out of a time during the pandemic. Many of you are aware that I don't have a studio in my home. I'm still a very much full-time working psychotherapist and group facilitator. So my practice is to go away on retreat, and I fill my entire car full of art supplies and go off to some cabin in the woods or at the coast and make art. And my first 2 retreats were canceled because of the pandemic. So I started working on the panels of this piece at home on the dining room table. And it incorporates gestural calligraphy, which is purposefully illegible. And the calligraphy is a repetition of haiku that I wrote in a practice that I've been doing for about 6 years called the haiku poet Busan's challenge of doing 10 haiku a day for 100 days. And so some of these haiku, let's see, the one that Tim is highlighting on now, I believe says, the only sound, wind sheltering in the cedars. And I wrote it over and over again. The panels themselves consisted of embroidery and collage and assemblage and pieces of old books. Tim's focusing now on vintage linen that I soaked and hand tore off of old books destined for the landfill. And down below are snippets of a vintage Asian box from Eleanor Murray, one of our beloved Sometimes Books exhibitors who passed away last year, who collected and sold to We Lucky Collectors Asian ephemera. So the piece came together. It was supposed to be just simple and playfully fun, but it got more and more complex. The book does close, and the original binding that I devised uses old insulation support rods from my husband's stash. I love working with old found materials and trying not to purchase anything new. That's part of the sustainability that I like to approach my work with. I studied with Sherrie Lovler, one of the other artists in this exhibit, and studied some traditional calligraphy as well as a lot of abstract calligraphic painting. And that's also where some of my influence came from in doing the calligraphics part of the work. The hanging mechanism for the piece was devised from bamboo from my backyard and some old leftover finials from a curtain rod that we never used that I painted and glued together. So that is my piece, Sheltering in Place, and the opening and closing pages when it folds up are those parts of the Asian box that I see that we're so snugly contained in, maybe over-contained during this sheltering in place time period. So anyway, thanks. Thanks again, Z and Tim, and all of you artists. This was just an absolutely amazing show to curate, and was an incredible joy to work with your art and be able to find ways to exhibit it so beautifully. So thank you.
Well, thanks to all of you for being part of this and agreeing to talk about your work. It's been wonderful from my point of view just to hear the stories behind the pieces. This is the end of our gallery portion. Tim and I are going to disappear, but there is time for question and answer, and Shelley will be the moderator for that. So thanks again to all of you for bringing your work here, for showing it, and for talking about it tonight.
And my apologies as the photographer, hand holding this iPad is a little awkward. It's not high cinema, but anyway, I hope it wasn't too bumpy. Thank you all. And so we're going to leave the Zoom.
And I'll take over now. And I want to say thank you to everyone for coming to our artist talks this evening. We really appreciate you being here. And I want to thank Tim and Z for helping us to be able to see the work. And thanks to Jenny Lynn for co-hosting tonight and helping me to keep an eye on things. And we'd like to thank Renee Owen for her curatorial work on this group exhibition. And thanks to all the artists who shared their work, their wonderful work with us to see. If you would like to support more project space exhibitions just like this one, we'd love for you to make a donation at galleryroute1.org. Gallery Route 1 is all spelled out. And there's a donation option at the top of the website. So please donate. And now if you want to stick around, we're going to open up Q&A. And so the way this will work is if you have a question, you will make your hand big in the screen so that I can see it. Another option, if you are familiar with it, is you can find the opportunity to use the raise the hand emoji. You find that in the participants link at the bottom. Okay, so let's open it up for questions. And if you have a question, you'll need to start your video so that we can see you raise your hand. And then when it's your turn, I'll call your name and then you will unmute. And we did have a few questions that landed in the chat.
I'd like to answer them, even though I did write something.
Okay, go ahead, Mirka.
So several people asked about the paper, and it's called Hanji, Hanji. It's Korean handmade paper. And as I mentioned, I was so attracted to it because I actually didn't have to do anything with it. All the variations of color and what might look like splotches or stains were all just part of the paper naturally. And my stitching followed the contours of those different variations.
Thanks, Mirka.
All right, yes. Does anyone else have a question out there? I see some people are leaving. So,
Dottie asked if this is recorded and if it will be available to view somewhere. I'll let Shelly answer that, but in case Dottie is not aware, there is a 13-minute video that Shelly and I made, which walked through the entire exhibit, and there was a little bit of narration that I did about each piece. And you can also access the online portion of the exhibit through tomorrow under current exhibits on Gallery Route 1. And after that, it will be archived under past exhibitions. And then you will just click on the name of the show, Falling Open, and you'll be able to see individual photos of the people's work. And sometimes they've put in some artist statements. Shelly, did you want to answer Dottie's question about whether or not this artist talk today has been recorded and if it will be available?
Sure, yes, we did record it, and I can't tell you the exact plan for sharing it, but I imagine it would get put onto our website. And so we'll have information about that in our next e-blast so that everyone can find it. All right, any more questions out there? Okay, Linda, yes, you want to unmute?
It's lower left.
There
Oh,
it is.
So I was wondering how many of the artists weren't here during this? It doesn't seem like we talked about all of the artwork. Is that right?
Yes, some of the artists did not come. We were expecting them to, like Lynn Dillon had a couple of prints in the show. Rachel Laufer had the hanging piece that was made of gorgeous blue plant printed cyanotypes with text in between. Let's see, who else was not here? A lot of people were here though.
And I missed the beginning, so maybe did you pan around the whole show so we could see everything? Or did we just look at the pieces of the people who were here?
Yeah, before we started, Tim did a little bit of panning, but not a lot. And then Tim went through with Z, just highlighting the pieces for the folks that were here. But of course, the video does some panning of the whole show because I know, Linda, you're too far away to have seen it live. There's nothing like seeing it live. So if any of you need to pick up your own work, you artists, you can pick it up tomorrow at 5 o'clock when the exhibit closes. If you show up at 4:30, you will get a last chance to see it, because
See the show.
as beautiful as the video is, and as great job that Shelly did capturing the work, because of the variation in size of the pieces, from smaller like your piece and Sherrie Lovler's piece to the huge pieces and the hanging work, you don't really get a sense fully of the show without seeing it live. So I do encourage you guys to do that, you artists, and any of you in the audience. If you haven't been out to see it, you have a chance tomorrow to see it live. Last chance.
Great. Well, this was really a great experience. So thank you so much.
Renee, I just wanted to add that for anybody who's interested, I wrote a blog post about the exhibit, but I wasn't able to include every single artist, or the post would have gone on and on and on. So if you look at my website, mirkaart.com, and go to the blog, you might find yourself on the post.
It was a beautiful post. Thank you, Marka.
You're welcome.
If no one else from the audience raises their hand quickly, Shelly's gonna say goodnight for all of us. Does anyone else have a question?
Okay, this may be the end of our evening.
I just want to say before we close, thank you to Mary Eubank, who of course founded Sometimes Books Gallery in her studio so many years ago. And almost all the artists that are here today have been exhibiting for years in Mary's quarterly exhibits. Mary has closed her studio, and she is still, of course, a member of Gallery Route 1. Z and Tim helped with the Sometimes Book shows that we did for years. And this exhibit was intending to be sort of a way to honor all of you and to honor Mary. So thank you all, and thank you, Shelley and Jenny, for making this happen tonight, and Z and Tim. And thanks to you fabulous artists. Keep creating.
All right. Thank you, Renee, and everyone for coming, and we'll see you next time.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you all.